I am Bertram of the Four Riders of Daein. You can end my life. Please.
Yeah, that about sums up my thoughts. That's gonna be going on through this video. We're gonna talk about Bertram on who's our latest Grand Hero Battle unit, but there is not a lot of positives I can give out for this one. Bertram is one of the Four Riders of Daein, which are the top generals serving Ashnard, including Bertram and the Black Knight. Bertram will be our third rider joining us, and he's going to be a Sword Cavalier. We do not get many free-to-play Sword Cavs, so Bertram does stand out a bit just by actually existing. For stats, he has 45 HP, 37 attack, 27 speed, 38 defense, and 26 res. He will come with a res super boon. For the most part, Bertram is going to be another Cavalier with that very awkward high 20 speed stat. 27 speed is not really amazing, and while you can build around it, it will require immense investment. For his other stats, Bertram does have good HP and defense. He does have the highest base defense for all sword cavs, and 26 res is fine considering a lot of melee cavs really struggle with magic. 37 attack is okay as well. Bertram was another enemy boss who wielded the rune sword, but the devs said no. Instead, for his weapon, they're going to give him the instant sword plus. This 14-might sword grants plus 4 attack defense and prevents a follow-up attack when you're initiating. Instant sword is the same as Valentine's Conrad's melee bouquet plus. These are mini sturdy impact weapons, and while extra attack and defense is nice, it's the follow-up prevention that is important. Instant sword will basically be a player-based survivability tool. If you can't get the kill, then you hope to at least not get doubled and stay alive. This is a fine tactic for defense teams where staying alive is way more annoying, but in general usage, it's just better to go kill the target instead. Obviously, with only 27 speed, Bertram is not looking very fast, which means doubling anything but a tank is looking grim. He may be able to survive the engagement, but then what? For general content, this isn't really the most exciting weapon, but it's an option for surviving. For the rest of his base kit, Bertram has Ignis as his special, which is fine, but kinda a high cooldown. He then comes with Dull Close, which neutralizes all enemy field buffs when fighting melee foes. Last up, he has Rouse Attack and Defense 3, which grants plus 6 attack and defense when starting the turn alone. Overall, not the craziest base kit to work with. Dull Close is strong when it works, but it just takes up such a valuable skill slot, and low B skills are generally the go-to instead. Ignis is great with Bertram's high defense, but how is he going to get it charged up? Rouse Attack and Defense is perfectly fine for self-buffing. It does go great with solo skills, and it is Bertram's 4-star skill if you want to use it for fodder. For merging, the neutral nature is going to give Bertram plus 1 HP attack and defense. That's great if you don't want to spend trait fruits, and he has a res super boon, which can be nice for a pure tank build. If you do want to build Bertram, he can be quite bulky for a cavalry unit, and by virtue of there just not being a lot of newer free-to-play options, he's going to have a pretty large stat advantage. In fact, Bertram is literally only the third heroic rail sword cavalier. Our last one was 2 years ago, and that was Kempf. Then we had Xander in year 1. Generally speaking, Bertram is most similar to Xander as a slower unit with good HP and defense. He has more attack and res to work with, but Xander also has Siegfried, which now has a refine. Despite the massive BST difference without Dragon Flowers, Xander gets to mess around with distant counter, and his refine gives him fall prevention, plus -5 attack and defense debuffs on the foe. In fact, if you think about it, refined Siegfried can almost act like the instant sword plus, but with the slight tiny advantage of also coming with distant counter. Now that's a pretty big deal if you want to invest in a heroic grow unit, I would say. Now compared to Kempf, Bertram obviously has more attack and defense, but Kempf also has his Venom Edge. He's a very unique unit with that weapon and can apply the no counterattack status with AoE out of combat damage. Kempf isn't exactly blazing fast either, but he is faster than Bertram and isn't too far behind in attack, so he's a clear better offensive threat. There are not a whole lot of 3 to 4-star Sword Cavaliers either, but every one of them now has their own unique weapons. In fact, there was only one other Sword Cav without one, and that was Valentine's Conrad, who is the only seasonal unit. What a coincidence that it's the exact same weapon as Bertram. Now, in terms of stats, Bertram kinda just brute forces things by literally being 4 to 5 BST generations ahead of everyone else. Maybe Stall or Seth are the closest comparisons. Still, everyone here has their own niches, even if some aren't that amazing, like poor Seth. You then have guys like Ares with his super cool Dark Mistletoe, and Eliwood, the godly low rarity Sword Cavalier who got to piggyback off Brave Roy's busted Blazing Durand of the Refine. As an up-to-date unit, Bertram at least has a lot of extra base stats to utilize if you aren't using Dragon Flowers. For the most part, Bertram is going to be another Grand Hero battle unit who is relegated to the quicker post lifestyle. You can try to use instant sword with things like attack and defense solo or sturdy blow, but Bertram probably isn't one-shotting most units, and then you don't have a lot of enemy phase power afterwards. You could use attack and defense catch 3 from Sedgar to get dual phase power with solo seals, and Raz's attack and defense does at least give you buffs. Dual close can be nice, but I do think Bertram needs that open slot for either quicker post or a breaker skill if you're on a budget. Ideally, attack smoke isn't bad either, but for surviving the enemy phase after engaging, but there are a lot of risks to sending Bertram out on leaving him in enemy territory. If you do go with quicker post, then you can stack things like forms or bonds or stance skills. You could do mixed phase with quicker post plus instant sword, but if you lose too much health on the player phase, then quicker post is useless. If you are set on initiating, then Axe Breaker could at least make Bertram an actual threat by giving him a double. There aren't really a lot of great tools for this weapon unless you go for more premium skills. One interesting skill to use with the instant sword could be Near Trace. Assuming you survive, Near Trace provides counter movement, and this could make this playstyle a bit more intriguing. Bertram can go in and either move away or be saved by a teammate, or open up a warping type play. For example, you could do a Fury or Push build, or just try to force Bertram into lower HP to trigger Wings of Mercy. It's kind of awkward for a unit with this stats, but maybe it could work. Another tool for instant sword are the Menace C skills. These provide a huge debuff and buff advantage, and it should hit someone in Bertram's initiating range. They are that way you can make him more deadly instead of relying on Ra's positioning. If you do just send Bertram alone, then things like solo or double solo skills or the catch skills work very nicely. You could fully stack defense and rends, or maybe try for speed. Honestly, if you're going to do a speed build, I think the best weapon would be the Unbound Blade Plus. It also has a solo condition built in and gives Bertram extra tankiness and damage, which can let him focus on full speed skills. We even have low attack and speed on Percival in the Ephemera shop this month. I wouldn't advocate spending that rare skill on Bertram, but the option is available if you want to. On the other hand, if you want to embrace the quicker post tank playstyle, then you can go with Tannet's Steadfast Sword, or just pick up Spring Bartry's Carrot Cudgel through the same weapon. These give you an attack and defense boost and get rid of attack and defense penalties. You then can run the usual tank skills like Brazen Stance 3, Fortress Defense and Res, or Bonds or Forms. You can also use low attack and defense plus quicker post, or opt for just quicker post and grab something else. Admittedly, there is not a huge advantage for a pure tank cavalry build. There's nothing wrong with it, but if you're not going to stay near allies, then you could use a unit with more BST and better skills like infantry or army units. Besides lulls, cavaliers just don't really have anything super fancy for tanking, and for Bertram specifically, another issue is lack of inheritable swords. Unbound Blade is great, but it's locked to a 5-star only unit. Outside of Carrot Cudgel, there are very little options for defensive swords. Maybe Barrier Blade, but that is about it. I think one thing to watch out for if you really want to use Bertram in the future is a possible Stout Sword Plus. Stout Lance from Roshea is just Courtly Candle, and that weapon is amazing for pure tanking builds since it adds damage reduction, something Cavaliers just don't get. It would be an interesting new option, but Cavs still lack any kind of impressive tanking skills. Now, because I'm bored of this year's Grand Hero battle units just getting no unique weapons, here's a look at all the inheritable swords in the game, at least the ones that I could find. If you want an obtainable, free-to-play option for Bertram, there are not a lot of options. Again, I think Carrot Cudgel and maybe the Barrier Blade are the best defensive swords for him. Bertram could run a Brave Sword or Armor Slayer with his decent base attack, but a lot of units can do the same job. To be honest, even with the 5-star or seasonal options, there just isn't a lot of insane swords to grab. I feel like Unbound Blade or the Ninja Katana are the only high tier weapons worth watching out for, with a mention for the Pledged Blade from Bridal Orboro. For Bertram specifically, Pledged Blade is nice because it grants cooldown reduction, which again Cavaliers lack in general. The only speed focused weapon I would go for is the Cake Cutter from Bridal Sigrin. She was in Ephemera Comet Manual earlier, so maybe you have her. Honestly, it's pretty sad how few good swords there are out there and how many of them are locked to 5-star units. I think part of this is that we just do not see a lot of 4-star focused seasonal sword units, or we don't see a lot of Tempest Trial sword users, and when we do, they all have unique weapons. For the past year, we've seen some godly axes for Tempest units like Springy Axe, Pledgian Axe, or even last year's Ninja Masakari and this year's ones too. Even the lances got good picks like Courtly Candle, or 4-star focus ones like the Springy Lance or Winterhilda's Candy Cane, which would be super nice for someone like Bertram since it adds guard tier weapon. I know Fire Emblem is a heavy sword building franchise, but if you want an inheritable option, you do not have a lot of choices. Back on topic, should you promote Bertram to 5 stars? Well, Sword Cavaliers are rare and Bertram has decent HP defense to work with. One of my main complaints whenever we get these slower melee cavs like Fernand or Zealot is that there are no great skills for these types of units. It's basically been low attack and defense, quick riposte for ages, and then you just stack stats like everyone else. No damage reduction, no fallout prevention, no cooldown reduction. You have to turn to weapons for these types of effects, and while lances and axes have decent selections, there are just not many easy to get inheritable swords. There also isn't any incentive for enemy phase builds since you're wasting the 3 movement of your cavalry class type, you're losing out on total base stats, and you have no unique skills again. All of these factors do not help Bertram out, and the lack of unique weapon definitely hurts more when you got a guy like Xander who has built-in distant counter and fallout prevention. I feel like Bertram got the exact same treatment as Orson. 2 boss characters who could have gotten the rune sword since they're going with the fallen aesthetic, which is perfect for that evil sword kind of thing, and they both have similar stats with Ra's attack and defense. Both of them do have good art though, so at least they got that going for them. Orson may also have a unique lance, but breath lance is certainly not insane by any means. Overall, Bertram is certainly not going to stand out without major investment. I think a lot of people can agree that this has just not been a good year for Grand Hero bad units at all, and last month I thought Sigurd was potentially a turning point despite not being super unique. Well, hopefully book 6 can turn things around next month. Let me know your thoughts on Bertram in the comments, and if you do want to build him, go right ahead. He's certainly not completely terrible, just a bit disappointing, I think is the general feeling going around. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.